All right, guys, welcome back to Invariance.Poker podcast. Today will be podcast number 8, and yesterday Dylan and I played a 2-5 session, and so I wanted to get this podcast in so that we could give you the content while it's still fresh on our mind. So the first thing we'll go into are the hand histories. So Dylan will be the one explaining and recalling the hand history because as we get older, our mind and our ability to process information and recall information tend to be slow. So I know this is where I'm going to regress, and this is why younger players tend to be better at poker than older players because they're able to recall information and process information a lot faster than us older people. So we'll go ahead and let Dylan go first, and let's bring up the hand history, the 9-10 hand history first.
I had one hand with 9-10 of hearts from early position, and I raised like 15 or 20. A couple people called, and then this guy who's like a payoff wizard and kind of a little bit splashy raised to 65. Folded to the big blind who called, I called, and then the guy to my left called. And the flop, I flopped top 2 pair. It was like 10-9-6.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about leading out, but I just checked, and then checked around. And the turn, what was the turn? It was basically a blank, but I think it brought a flush draw, so I let out for 50 or something like that. And then the guy to my left called, and the other 2 folded, and the river was a 10, so I actually had the nuts. And so I bet I went pretty big, I think 325 or something like that. And the guy to my left snapped with king 10, so we had trip 10s, but I had a full house. And the next hand I had king jack off from I think the low jack.
Let's go to that one first. So the concept that I wanted to bring out to Dylan in that hand was that the donk lead, the donk bet, which is if you don't play poker, is when you're not the initial raiser and you lead out on the flop. So the reason I told Dylan that this board texture is a good board texture for leading out is because at 1-2, the difference here is at 1-2, a player, let's say they have queens, jacks, or aces, or an overpair, they would probably just bet and go with it because the stacks are relatively shallow and they're only looking at the strength of their hand. Whereas at 2-5, these players start looking at relative hand strength and they start looking at their opponent. So the player that you're talking about is does play a lot of poker. He's just loose, but he's somewhat thinking. So players like that, they will probably tend to check back a lot of their medium strength hand, like maybe queens or jacks or ace 10. So then you miss out on some value and you let them pot control. So when you have a flop like that, when you flop up big like that, I tend to lead out so that it will also allow me to extract some more information onto their ranges. Whereas if they call, then I know because he 3-bet you pre-flop, then you can put him on a pretty strong range, maybe an overpair, minimum ace 10. But since you block ace 10, so then you could put him on an overpair or some kind of straight draw. So by leading out, you would also get value, but you can also balance your range because boards like that, I would also lead out with let's say pocket 8s because you have a gut shot, and it's not a hand that you want to check call with. So hands that it's too weak to check call, and you rather lead out and take the initiative. And then I would also do it with like ace 10, maybe even 9-8, 10-8, something with a pair and a gut shot, where these are ranges that you don't want to check call with. It's just too weak. And if you check call, you really don't have a chance to win unless you hit. Whereas if you lead out, you have a chance to win. Even on like you have a pair 8, you could semi-bluff the board. So it gives you a lot more playability by donk leading this bet out. So that's where I would recommend on board textures that are coordinated, because I also do it with sets and straights, because then that way you can start getting value out of these hands.
Yeah, I do that with sets too.
Sometimes. Then let's go to the I think that king jack hand is play itself out, but let's go ahead and just recall it since we already talked about it already.
I had king jack off from the low jack. I raised, the hijack called, the cutoff called, and then that sort of splashy player called from the small blind, and the flop came. I think I flopped a gut shot. Oh no, I flopped a double gutter. It was like 8-10 queen or 8-10. What was it? I don't know. I flopped a double gutter, but I just decided to check and checked around, and then the turn. Oh, sorry, no, I flopped a backdoor straight draw, and the turn gave me an open-ended. The splashy player checked. I just decided to check, and then the guy to my left, the guy with the king 10 on the last hand, he bet with ace jack because the jack made an open-ended, and the splashy player called, and I called, and then the river was a queen, so I actually had the nuts straight, but the turn also brought the spade draw, and it was the queen of spades on the river. And so the splashy player checked, I checked, because I'm a little worried about the flush. And then the guy to my left bet like 125 or something. The splashy player called, and then I sort of thought about it because I thought maybe we all have jacks, which they both had jacks, but I decided to call. And one guy had ace jack, and then the splashy player had jack 4 of spades, so he had a straight end flush. But I guess if he had jack 4 offsuit, then I would have scooped with the king high straight because they just had queen high straights. So that's why I called, but I didn't like the flush there.
Yes. So the way I analyzed the play was, if Dylan only had the jack, then it's probably most likely a fold because you could be up against a flush draw and you're most likely chopping. So there's not enough equity in there. But given that he had king jack, the high straight, is a neutral EV call because you have to assume one of them also probably has a flush draw in there with it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have called to chop. With queen high straight.
but the way I would have probably played that hand was on the river. I probably would have bet maybe 80 just to extract some value, so that that way a straight will call. Because there might be a chance that a straight might even check back because of the flush. We just don't know these players. But then you can also give you a chance to fold to a re-raise. Whereas that way you could also get some value out of jacks, the straight. But that would have been my play because that would have gave me more information, and then I would have been able to control the size of the pot versus a flush. So I think it's very minimal in terms of what check calling versus betting, but I probably would have opted to bet there so that you're not put into a tough spot. Let's say if you check, they check around, and then the guy who had a flush bets big, and now you're stuck in position of does he have the flush or is he just overplaying his jack? So you don't want to put yourself in the spot of having to guess. So that's where I think a line of the betting would be a little bit better.
Yeah, man, if that queen were an offsuit queen, I would have scooped because they both had jacks.
Yeah.
That would have been nice.
Yeah. So then let's go to a hand that I played because so it was a limp pot all the way around, and I was in the big blind with ace jack offsuit, and I just checked. I think it was a straddle, so I just completed a straddle, and then the flop came. You could tell them the hand.
King queen 10.
So he
10.
flopped
the nuts.
Yes.
And the splashy player I keep on talking about had king 10, so he flopped 2 pair.
Yeah. There was also a flush draw on the board, the hearts, and I didn't have any of the hearts blocker as well either. So what I did was I let out, and the reason I lead. So this is important. I think this is an important hand because a lot of players because they tend to autopilot. They look down ace jack. Well, I have a pretty strong hand. I'm gonna raise. But let's play out the way if I did raise that hand, let's just say to $50, and more chances are I'm going to get multiple callers. There's not going to be a lot of flops that I'm going to be really excited about unless I flop like gin. Let's say I flop a jack high board. Well, okay, if I bet and get called, it's going to be putting me in a tough spot on the turn in the river on what to do. Do I check here check call for pot control, or do I bet? If I bet here, there could be a chance that somebody's trapping me and letting me bet. So then I would value betting myself. If I check here and somebody bets, well, I'm stuck in a position of guessing. So by just keeping my hand deceptive, now on almost all flops, I could lead out literally 100%, and that was my plan to play that hand was 100% of the board I'm going to lead out. Let's say even a king high flop, queen high flop, where it would weaken my jack if I were to pair up on the board later, but it would give me a backdoor straight draw. Anything else low board, it would give me 2 overcards so that it would keep barreling. So, and then let's just say if it go low board and something connects with a jack that would give me a gut shot, I could start barreling. So there's a lot of ways you could play by just being deceptive and keeping that pot small so that you could take initiative right on the flop, and you don't overinflate the pot out of position. Because one of the things I stress to players is try to pot control and play small pots when you're out of position, because you will end up making too many mistakes by inflating the pot if you don't know how to maneuver carefully.
Yeah.
So that's where we wanted to talk to Dylan about the donk lead, and I think a lot of people don't know how to utilize the donk lead, but the donk lead is very good play for out of position, because it allows you to capture the initiative and get good reads on players by basing on the board's texture and the run out. You could kind of range them better versus check calling them.
Yeah, I like donk leading sometimes because when people donk lead, most people put you on the flush draw or like a really marginal second pair or top pair no kicker type of hand. So if you have a big hand and they have like an over pair or something like that, they might raise you and you can just move in sometimes.
Yeah, and also this is where the previous podcast we talked about really just playing exploitative at 1-2, whereas now we're at 2-5, but you have to balance yourself. So in order to a donk lead, most people don't know how to balance, right? Most people, you said, donk lead with just really strong hand. So if you're waiting for a strong hand to donk lead, it really merges your range to the strong hands. Now you don't have any weak hands, so anybody who picks it up can easily fold to your donk lead if they know that all you're leading is strong hands. Whereas now, if they see that you're leading with overcards, bottom pair, backdoor draws, now you're getting a lot of people that are going to be willing to float you light, and you get more value out of them, and you disguise your hand better. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
All right. So now this is where Dylan isn't prepared for any of this. Is that we're gonna get into more of metaphysical talks and games and metagame. So yes, metagame, because in the topic today we're gonna talk about is actually spirituality. I brought this up at the poker table. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So that's and a lot of people don't tie spirituality to poker, and this is where we're going to connect it to people. So do you remember what I said spirituality is?
Yesterday?
Definition of spirituality.
I think I was talking to someone about the Michigan game.
Coming up. So in psychology, the definition of spirituality is simple. It's basically an ability to maintain self-awareness. So when we talk about spirituality, we're not trying to dive into anything religious or anything. We're actually talking about awareness. And if we play poker, then poker is a game of observation and awareness. So in order to get better at poker, you have to develop these skills that will actually improve and work on your spirituality. And what spirituality really is if you work on your spirituality, it's basically working on the metagame, the inside, your inside. And so then we hear the idea of metagame all the time, but do you even know what meta means?
No.
Take a wild guess. If I were to tell you what metaphysical means, do you have an idea what it means?
I mean, I've heard it used before, but I don't know exactly what it means.
So meta means anything that is beyond or that incorporates encompassing. So metagame, you could say, is beyond the game. Like that means that beyond just the technical, and then it goes into the mind part, the mental game, and the leveling. And then the same thing with metaphysical is beyond the physical, which is, we could say, in the spiritual realm, the realm of the inner world. Like like within us, there's an entire world that we don't know about, we don't discover, the world of emotions and feelings and thoughts and energy. And these are all, we could say, metaphysical stuff, or for people that aren't into poker, you could say spirituality. So we'll avoid the term spirituality for now, and we'll hark on the concept of metaphysical and metagame. So the reason this is important is because when you get better at poker, what a lot of people are starting to want to work on their spirituality. They want to improve as a human being, develop their self-awareness, and they want to get better, right? They want to, you hear the terms, a lot of people talk about, being mindful. This is part of spirituality as well, and is all in the meta game. So our goal here is to use poker eventually to provide context for spirituality. Any of that ring a bell or anything?
Yeah, you talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
The tables.
So I lost my train of thought. So then when we talk about spirituality, the first thing that people tend to think about, we talk about, is happiness and suffering. Because that's what I guess the core of people, when people want to develop their spirituality, what they want to do is increase their level of happiness and remove suffering. But the suffering that we're talking about here is not the suffering of like when you get a dog bite. The suffering is the mental suffering that we all go through.
Oh, like getting aces cracked.
So I assume you, as a kid, you probably suffer a lot. Do you have any
Not really.
No, not yet.
Only in poker.
Only in poker, right? When you tilt. So then, where do you think suffering comes from, and what is your perception of suffering?
Well, for example, if you have aces and you go all in and get called by pocket twos, and pocket deuces flop quads, and you really wanted to stack this player, but you just got flop dead. That's sometimes it may cause tilt, which is and while you're tilting, you're basically suffering.
Okay, but let's dive deeper. Why is it? How are you suffering? Like, what is this suffering that we're talking about?
You want to be somewhere else.
You want to be somewhere else. So, you feel pain, right? There's so then let's go deeper. What pain is this that you're feeling, and where does it come? Do you see where it come from at all, or do you know? Do you have any idea about it?
Let me think. I guess in poker it comes from losing money.
So the suffering that arises is basically negative emotions, right? But these negative emotions are triggered by perception. We see something that doesn't appeal to us, that doesn't bring us pleasure, so it brings us pain. And this mental pain is the suffering. So, but then we dive deeper. Where is this? What is this? What perception triggered this rise of emotion? And what we see is that most of the time is the perception of lost. We lost something. And that's always where suffering comes in, is that this perception of something and loss. But it's because our perception isn't clear. That's why people who are not perceptive, they tend to suffer more at the poker table, right? They just see what's in front of them. They lost the chips, so they suffer. Whereas anybody who, as you get better, as you get mentally stronger, you can look further out. You can see that, okay, this is the ebb and flow of poker. It's going to cause, it's going to trigger certain emotions, highs and lows. So then when the time comes that these emotions are triggered, you could take a step back and look at the chain of events and realize that this is natural for suffering to arise. And then that way you're able to deal with it more. Whereas if people who cannot see this, when the suffering arises, it torments them. It wrecks their inside and just causes them to do all kinds of silly things, and they lose themselves in it. So by increasing your perception, you could decrease your suffering. But what's more important is that suffering is actually a good thing, necessary.
Oh, it's necessary.
Yes, because as a person, if we're living the high life, we're all happy and everything. Well, what we do is we enter this state of waking sleep. We just going through life cruising, and we lose self-awareness, right? We talked about spirituality as awareness. We lose awareness, and we can always check ourselves, our level of awareness, by checking, do we remember that we're breathing? And most of the time, no. And then right when I said that, you probably checked yourself and remember you're breathing. So whenever you check yourself like this, you actually increase your level of consciousness. So when we're happy and drown out in pleasure, we don't have this moment that of awareness. Whereas, let's say your house is burning, or you just lost a big hand. Well, now you're suffering internally, and it awakens you. You're more alert. So now you're not actually drown away in some kind of la la land. You actually you're brought right back here. So then it allows you to focus on your awareness and brings you back, and then that's where so suffering is good in that it increases our level of awareness slowly if we know how to harness and cultivate this suffering.
Yeah, most people, or at least a lot of poker players, don't know how to do that usually.
Yeah, because we really never were exposed to this concept, right? Like nobody can tell you that suffering is good, right? No, and then nobody can tell you. Nobody even has ever kind of found this idea that, hey, poker might be an opportunity for you to actually train by, you could say, because poker simulates suffering. So then now, if you play poker at the time when you suffer, don't let the tragedy go to waste. Actually, work on yourself, and see where this suffering come from, and then go back to the chain of events. And what you can realize is eventually you'll be mentally strong enough where you could take an objective look. And when we say objective look, what we're saying is, okay, there's cards on the table, cards are being dealt, player has chips move in based on the rules, there's math involved.
Go away from you.
Yep, there's math involved. And then based on math, certain actions happen, and then as the cards come out, results happen. That's objective looking, right? There's no attachments to chips. There's no my chips, I lost, you lost. There's just the game. And if you can take this objective look, then it will allow you to remove some of the suffering, because you see things clearer. And it's the same thing in life too. When bad things happen to us, if we can take an objective look and look at the chain of events, we can see the cause and the results. And seeing this is all that it takes in order for us to alleviate some of the suffering. So this is very important for people with PTSD, because anybody with PTSD is basically thoughts or something triggered their thoughts. It's really strong thoughts, and these thoughts trigger really strong emotions to come up. But the thoughts are from the past. Nothing actually happened. But because PTSD is such a strong event that we're unable to, we lose ourselves. That is so in these thoughts and emotions, and we're not able to step back and take an objective look. And in life, it's really hard to simulate suffering. No one tries to do that. Yeah, there's no way you could simulate suffering. Whereas in poker, there's the suffering at every hand. So it's an opportunity to learn, and that's why poker is a good way to actually practice your spirituality, and practice your awareness, and practice your observation skills. And at the end of the day, the most important thing of all this is that you need to be able to remember yourself. what is that, when I say remember yourself, what does that mean to you?
Remember not to go on tilt like a crazy person, right?
Well, yeah, remember, it's actually simpler. You just got to remember that you're here and that you're breathing. And most of the time, you don't remember that. When you're doing your daily activity, you don't remember that you're breathing. And and if you keep working on it throughout your day, try to remember yourself. What you can do is your perception and gets clearer, and then eventually you start seeing things better, and that's what we call insight, the ability to see things deeper and deeper, because you are able to perceive everything better. And then the concept of self-remembering, because there's this book here that I read, The Fourth Way. They talk about back in the past, everybody, all the gurus and the spiritual people, they worked on, their goal was to try to work on enlightenment. And the step to enlightenment is the ability to remember yourself as long as you can. So that, and it's hard to do when you're doing difficult things, but when you're doing simple things like walking, or just playing poker or driving, these are actually moments where you can actually practice remembering yourself, and it's very important. And what you can notice if you keep doing this is there's no like flip of the switch. You're not going to notice. It's very transitory. Like it's going to go up and down, but when you take a step back, you can be like, hey, I remember myself for a lot longer. I remember that I'm breathing. And this is where yoga also helps you.
I watched a couple videos on YouTube because I think that iMoves app, it's not on the App Store, the one you use.
Okay.
But yeah, the other night I looked at a couple of videos. I'm not really flexible at all, so I was just kind of, seeing what I could do.
It's a start, because nobody's flexible to begin with, but you have to start. Because one of the things that I talked about with the other person the other day was the reason I recommend yoga for a lot of poker players, because if we sit a lot, eventually we're going to have really bad backs. And especially we sit with really bad posture. So what yoga is going to do is, because you're doing a lot of bending and stretching, it's going to strengthen your back. And anything, like if you have any back issue, it's going to actually regenerate and heal your back. So that's the one benefit of doing yoga for poker players. And the other benefit is that our body has a lot of meridians. They're energy channels. And right now, most of us, our body is so kind of like bent and distorted that the energy is not flowing smoothly. That's why sometimes you feel like a lack of energy, or you feel a burst of energy. But once you start doing yoga, what you can do is because you're gonna be stretching yourself and bending yourself and being more flexible, and you're gonna start opening these channels and meridians, and you're actually gonna start having more energy. And not only that, but you actually stop wasting so much energy doing things, because you don't know how to cultivate this energy. And then lastly, this doesn't apply to you because you're young and skinny, but a lot of poker players are overweight. And the reason is because, like, most of us, we have like maybe 3 to 5 pounds of just poop stuck right here, and there's no way to get it out. So, and then it eventually leads to other sickness like, colon cancer and all that. So the best way to get this poop out is to start squeezing it and condensing it together. And yoga, by bending over and stretching, what we're doing is we're condensing all this poop in our body so that eventually it will come out easily. And then we'll be a lot more cleaner inside, and we'll be less sick, and we won't feel so sluggish. Yeah. And this is all issues that poker players have, and they don't know how to fix it. So, and you see it all the time. They eat unhealthy. They don't.
I see it.
So hopefully we could use you as an example to set the stage for other poker players. Sounds fun? Sounds interesting?
Yeah, after like a 12-hour session, I feel really sluggish afterwards.
It's because your energy, because you use a lot of your energy to think, and and that we'll go on to another concept is that a lot of us, we waste too much energy throughout the day thinking, thinking random thoughts, and each of us every day only has a certain amount of energy in our reservoir before we have to rest and recuperate. So if you constantly using your energy on other thinking random things, which triggers random emotions to arise, you're burning energy that unnecessarily. Whereas if you can maintain your deep breathing, maintain just your awareness of yourself, what you can realize is that you're not going to waste so much of your energy thinking bullshit. So it will help you.
Yeah.
Cool. Any final thoughts or questions before we end this one?
Okay, what about what's the time? Sorry. Well, if you had to think of a moment where you went on the worst tilt ever, but then learned a lot because of it, what happened exactly? I guess it must have been a while ago when you were.
Yeah, it had to have been a while ago. But I really can't even think of the times where I tilted a lot. I guess it was online.
Online?
Yeah, back when I was online, I was. Because the reason back then when online, I played 24 tables, so things happen fast. And then when you have a string of events of just aces getting cracked and crack, it happens so fast that the tilt rises so fast that you don't have the time to catch yourself. And then you hear stories of guys punching the laptops and breaking the monitors. Well, I was close to that moment, and that was when I realized, hey, I got to get mental game coaching, because if I don't do this, it won't. Then I know that my game is capped, and the difference between a good poker player and a great poker player and professional is not so much in their technical game, but it's in their mental game. And that's, if you work on your mental game, that's going to give you a way bigger edge than trying to work on your technical game. Because if you watch people at the poker table, even the best, the smartest people,
pros, on their Instagram a lot of the time they have a lot of stuff on positivity, for example, or mental game tips and stuff like that, where you probably wouldn't think of that as the first thing that has to do with being good at poker if you're just starting.
Yeah, most players start out, they want to know the ranges, 3-betting and all that.
No, I think it's funny that Phil Hellmuth's, his Instagram, it's all about positivity, but then he gets so mad in person sometimes and starts yelling sometimes.
Yeah. See, so there's a lot of, you could say, fake positive people out there. They'll repeat stuff they hear on TV, and they'll go out and they'll be like woo woo, say all these positive things, and then the minute something hits them, they crack, and that's when they're just I don't want to say fake, but they're just kind of a woo woo person. So whereas you can tell a person whether they're authentic or not in their positivity by their actions and their ability to not say anything. A fake positive person will go around and try to tell all these positive things, whereas an authentic person will just the time be able to control themselves and hold themselves and just say things that are necessary and encouraging. They're not trying to shower the world with flowers or anything. They're direct, okay, this is the moment that you gotta just maintain your cool and just composure. That's being positive, right? That's not telling you, oh, why don't you smile more and just think about the sky. That's you could say voodoo positivity. So, and we don't want to go there. We want to show players, hey, these are practical and systematic things to do to be positive, and then not just trying to be a fairy. Anything else? No? All right. Well, so if hopefully our podcast this is a precursor to a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, which is we want to focus on more mental game and metaphysics stuff, like perception, emotions, fulfillment, sensitivity. We could even go into relationships, because all this actually ties into poker, because it comes with perception, and perception shapes reality. So, all right, thank you, listeners, for joining us, and have a Merry Christmas, and we'll catch you probably next year.
Yeah, I guess next year. Yeah.
Next year. All right. Peace out.